Hey friend, in today's watercolor tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you how to paint this winter cabin landscape. Without further ado, let's get painting. For today's tutorial, I'll be using Burnt Umber, Black, Payne's Gray, Purple, Pink, Prussian Blue, and Naples Yellow by Winsor & Newton. I also have some white gouache, 3 brush sizes by Princeton brand in sizes 2, 6, and 16, and the paper I have taped down here is a size 5 by 7 inches. To start our painting, I'm just going to water down some black with my size 2 brush and get a really loose sketch for the composition of our painting. I'm going to start by doing a kind of roof shape for our cabin. So I'm starting about the halfway point of our paper here, and I'm just going to do a really loose triangle shape that's kind of open at the bottom. From there, I'm going to do a square just like so. And then I'm going to do a rectangle attached to the square portion. And I'm going to elongate the top line here just a bit further out. From there, I'm going to do another kind of parallel line for the roof, let it end a bit early here, and then just connect it to this corner just like that. I think I'm going to elongate the length of this kind of rectangle here, and then I can just use some water and pressure with my brush to simply just kind of erase this other line. Not a problem. We're going to paint some brown over here, nice dark rich brown anyway, so it'll be covered regardless. Next, I just want to paint the chimney, so I'm just going to do a tiny little cute square just over towards the left, just like that. So we have our really loose sketch of our cabin. From here, I'm going to paint the silhouette of our snowbank. So I'm going to start our snowbank kind of higher up and do a few kind of jagged, irregular curves, just like so. Next, I'm going to kind of continue that over towards the right. Kind of goes slightly up, down, and then up again. From here, I want to sketch the silhouette of where the snowbank is going to meet our water. So I'm going to paint kind of a curved line, just like so. And then over towards the right, we're going to have a little bit more snowbank kind of peep through. So I'm just doing some really irregular kind of C curves interlocked here. And in this area, we're going to have our little reflective pond. With the reflective pond, I do want to have our cabin reflect. So in order to achieve that, I'm going to kind of reverse mimic the sketch here. So I'm taking our really watered down gray just to do a really loose sketch. And we will go back over this with some water to kind of smooth it out. And to begin, I'm just doing a rectangle. Then I'm going to do a crooked line just like so. I'm going to do another crooked line just like that. Connect the 2 lines right there. And then I'm going to do a little rectangle, not rectangle, triangle, upside down triangle shape. And then connect the base just like so. And then do the little square for the chimney. Okay, so That's going to be our loose sketch of our reflection. From this point, we can actually begin our sky. So for the sky, we're going to use a lot of deep, vibrant color towards the base that's going to lighten up towards the top slightly. I'm going to just first start by saturating our page left to right all the way to the edges of the green tape and all the way along the border of our sketch. We're going to start with using our purple, our Payne's gray, and a little bit of Prussian blue, and then we're going to also add a few delicate touches of the rose color, the pink, and the Naples yellow, which is like a nice pastel tone. All right, just making sure we've got some evenness here all the way along the sketch. Okay, so while it's still wet, I'm going to start with Payne's gray, and I'm just going to paint some Payne's gray all along this edge. I'm also going to bring it up slightly, but I definitely want a nice concentrated amount towards the base. At this point, I'm just going to take my time with just painting along the edges here. If it's easier to use your size 2 brush to paint along the edges, feel free to do so. Okay, now I'm just going to take some water and just kind of pull from this Payne's gray and just loosely kind of lift it upward slightly. We still want the most concentrated amount to be at this base. While the Payne's gray is still wet, I'm going to get some purple. I want to create a little bit more warmth against this Payne's gray. And so adding a touch of purple is going to achieve that and just give it a little bit more richness. So I'm just kind of subtly layering that. And before I move on, I'm gonna add, switching gears to my size 6 brush, I'm gonna take some black, and I really want a touch of black just along this border here. So I'm just gonna paint the black, and I'm just gonna smooth out some of this sketch a little bit. I'm just kind of blotting some of the black irregularly into a little bit of the purple and blue above. And now I'm just gonna let that set. And I'm gonna go ahead and go back to my size 16 brush. And I'm just gonna take my brush and do a wash of water, reconnecting the water into the Payne's gray that's kind of muted. I'm gonna take a clean brush, just wipe it up and lift some of the color in this top row a bit. And now I'm going to take a subtle just touch of rose. I'm using permanent rose, but any pink will do. And I'm just gonna add a couple touches of this pink. Kind of layering it slightly on the colors below. Then from here, I'm gonna take a little bit of Naples Yellow, and it's just very subtle, but I just want a couple touches of this Naples Yellow blotted in, especially in this left corner, and then I'm adding just a little bit here as well towards the right. And then up towards the top, I'm just gonna add a little bit of Prussian Blue. I'm gonna add just a touch of it in this farther corner too, just a little bit. Then I'm just layering a touch of it on this lighter yellow area. And then over towards the left, I want to layer just a touch more pink. And it can even create a little bit of an orange hue against the Naples Yellow. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and allow the sky to set and dry. While that happens, I'm actually going to start this water area. And with the water, I'm going to start by first just doing a light wash, and I'm not trying to add too much pressure to where I completely drag out and buff out the sketch line that we did previously. So I'm just using really light pressure with my size 16 brush, painting alongside the edges here. And now I am going to start painting a little bit of touches of the Prussian Blue. So I'm going to add just a touch of Prussian Blue towards the top here. Okay. Then I want to add a couple touches of the Naples Yellow. And then I want to add a little bit of the pink, so I'm just going to add a few touches of that. And then from here, I'm going to do a little bit of Payne's Gray. I'm going to start by adding it on the left side here. And I'll add some towards the right of the cabin as well. From here, I want to add a little bit of purple, and I'm going to layer it on to the Payne's gray. And then I'm just going to paint some of that hue and some of that color just above the cabin. And I'm just going to grab a little bit of black and apply some black at the base. Allow it to kind of buff out and drag out. And because we have somewhat of a waterline here, I'm just gonna paint some more water over this area just to allow it to kind of softly blend a bit more. I'm gonna add just a touch more Prussian Blue. Then from here, I'm gonna get some brown, and I'm gonna paint some brown over in this rectangle shape. And over in this shape as well. And then I'm gonna apply just a little bit of black, especially on this kind of rectangle side, and then just a little bit as well over here. And then I'm just gonna clean up the edges a bit just by using my brush and kind of buffing out the edges just to be slightly smooth and watery, given that this is a watery, soft reflection. I'm then gonna take my brush and kind of lift some of the brown off of the snow-covered roof. I'm gonna paint a little bit of gray just to divide the border a bit, just on this line, and then I'm gonna take a hint of brown for the chimney with just a small hint of shading using the black, just nice and watered down. And then I'm going to take a little bit more black and just apply it at the base of our reflection. And before this fully dries over towards the left, I'm just gonna take a little bit of water and kind of buff out this little bloom that I have forming. So I'm just taking my size 6 brush and just kind of watering down that bloom adding some pressure. And take a little bit more Payne's Gray and Black and just paint that right on in. And then take a little bit of water to kind of blend that out. I'm just going to take a clean brush just to kind of help clean up this water line. Okay, so now I am going to start our cabin. We've got the reflection, but now we actually need to work on the cabin itself. So I'm going to start with some Burnt Umber. And I'm just going to paint some Burnt Umber, leaving an intentional gap alongside this left edge to mimic snow on the roof. And I'm going to fill in this area with a nice concentrated amount of the Burnt Umber. And then just being mindful, painting alongside this edge here. And then I'm going to take a little bit more Burnt Umber and just fill in this area, this little long rectangle. While the Burnt Umber is still wet, I'm going to take a little bit of black and start to add in just a few touches of shading using some black, allowing it to kind of bleed out into the Burnt Umber. So I'm just going along this triangle shape and along this edge. Looks like we have some bubbles forming, kind of funny. And then I'm gonna paint some black below the roof line here, a little bit towards the bottom in this edge. Next up, I'm going to take a clean brush that's slightly wet and just buff out this gray sketch line just a little bit. And now I want to take a little bit of Burnt Umber with a touch of black and paint our cute little chimney. And I'm painting one side a little bit more and allowing some water to kind of allow the rest to bleed out. I'm going to take a little bit more black and just outline the left side a bit more. And I'll take a touch more of Burnt Umber just to give it a little bit more brown. Okay, so I'm going to sketch out with the remaining Burnt Umber I have a vertical rectangle. And then I'm just going to take some black and fill that in with the black. And while the cabin sets a bit further, I'm gonna just focus on the roof for a moment and grab some Payne's Gray mixed with a little bit of black with plenty of water. So we want this to be very watered down. And I'm gonna add a little bit of shading towards the left of the chimney. I'm going to kind of gently outline the snow covered roof here, just like that. And then just add a couple touches of this gray color, just like so. And while it's still kind of setting, I'm gonna take a little bit of water just to buff out these sharp edges. And there we have a little bit more shading involved with the snow, so it's less flat. And I'm gonna move on to our snowbank here towards the bottom right corner while the rest of the burnt umber dries before we add some log cabin details. So I'm just gonna mix some black and some Payne's gray, and I am just going to apply a little bit of this color combo, especially along the edge, and just a little bit of dry brushing towards the right. I'm now gonna take some water with my brush and just kind of buff out the harshness and smooth out some contrast here. I'm going to take some water and just smooth out this transition line using pressure and water with my brush. I just kind of want to smooth this out a little bit. Okay, next, I can revisit the log cabin. For that, I'm going to use my size 2 brush and some burnt umber along with a little bit of black. So now I can paint a line dividing these two walls. And then from here, I'm just going to add some stripes, just going all the way across to kind of mimic the logs of the cabin. I feel like my paint diluted quite a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and do a second layer. And then I'm just going to outline the inside of this rectangle or triangle. I think that's more like it. The inside of this triangle, just like so. And then I'm just going to paint a few horizontal stripes just like that. And then I'm just going to paint the top with a little bit of that gray and a little bit towards the edges. I want to add a touch more. So just on the edges of this rectangle shape, I'm kind of relayering. Okay, so now I want to take my size 6 brush and start to add some snow-like texture, just like we did here, but in the snowbank. So I'm taking a little bit of Payne's gray and black. I'm gonna start by doing kind of a dry brush irregular streak here, maybe some on the left side of this hillside. And take a little bit of water. And just buff out some of the harshness of that. Next up, I want to do a little bit of shading below the house. And I'm going to add a little bit more just right below the border of this rectangle. From there, I'm just going to take a little bit of water to help soften and kind of subtly drag out some of the shading. And then over towards the right, I want to shade the left side of this mound a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of water to smooth that out. And then I'm going to drag some of the shading across. I'm going to just take a dry brush to kind of buff out some of this gray, kind of drag it horizontally. Okay, so next, I want to focus on some trees. So I'm going to start by mixing some of our Burnt Umber and our black. Kind of want to warm up the black a little bit. These trees won't have any leaves on them, but they will be nice kind of contrast and detail to our sky. Okay, so for the trunk, I'm going to use the size 6 brush, but I may switch gears here and there to our size 2 brush. But I'm going to start by painting a vertical line with light pressure, just like so. At the base of this, I'm just gonna kind of elongate the edges a bit, just to give it some unevenness. Then from here, I'm switching to my size 2 brush, and I wanna add a bunch of irregular branches, and some of them can even go all the way to the top of the page. But I'm gonna paint some kind of curvy, irregular branches. And whenever I draw some branches, I wanna kind of mimic some irregular Y letter shapes. So you could kind of see how I'm mimicking the Y letter, and it's just at different angles. And once you have the Y, you can add a secondary branch coming off of one of the arms and just continue from there. And just kind of build off of that. So that's kind of what I'm mimicking here. Okay, so from here, I am going to paint alongside the left edge of the tree a little bit of shading with the size 2 brush, just to give a little bit of shading there along the edge. And I'm going to do the same thing, the same kind of technique for the trees. And I'm going to do maybe 2 more on this side and maybe like 4 or 5 here. Before I move on to that though, I'm going to paint one that's kind of like tucked behind the cabin, and that one's a little bit different. So I'm going to do a large branch towards the left and apply just some really dainty, delicate brushwork to get some really loose branches here. And then I'll do kind of a second one that's slightly layering on top of this tree and all the branches. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mimic this tree and do some that are smaller than others, just playing with the variety of the direction of the branches and all of those details. So I'm going to go ahead and carry that over all the way across. Okay, using our same tree color, I'm gonna paint some really loose, kind of reflective trees down in the water. So I'm gonna switch gears to my size 6 brush and just paint some really loose branches and trunk marks, kind of just subtly reflecting above. So they're really loose and watery. So slightly more like muted in color for sure, definitely not as concentrated. So they're nice and soft and simple. I'm just painting some of the branches loosely, not fully copycatting the branches according to what's above in the tree line itself, but just getting the essence of the branches. I'm going to do just a few watery branches here above the cabin. Anytime your reflection color is a little too dark, you can just get some more water loaded with your brush to kind of pull from that pigment and use whatever's left of that for the branches. Okay, so now what I would like to do is mix up a little bit more Payne's gray and black. And with that, I am just going to shade just a little bit more of our shaded color below our trees. I'm going to start just by adding a few dashes of this color really loosely. And then from here, I'm going to take some water and just buff out some of that color. Okay, now I'm going to take some white gouache and I want to mimic a little bit of smoke coming out of the chimney. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a little bit of white gouache with my size 2 brush and just paint kind of an S curve swirling out of the chimney. And that looks super duper bright, so I'm going to take my size 2 brush just to subtly kind of fog the chimney smoke a bit. All right, and while that dries, my last finishing detail is going to be adding a little bit more texture towards the base here. And I just want to add a little bit more of that shaded color of the Payne's gray and the black, and just allow that to have a little bit more texture towards the base of the snow meeting the pond below. And I'll go ahead and grab my size 6 brush just to help kind of buff that out just a little bit. Thank you so much for joining me for today's watercolor tutorial featuring this winter cabin with this vibrant sunset sky. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any further landscape tutorials.